Hello and welcome to the Autumn Standout series. This series aims to create a monthly conversation around standout in the accounting and bookkeeping space, what it means, how it's relevant or important, how it benefits a firm and its clients, if it does, has this changed over time, and what role it needs to play in the future, if it does. My name is Philippa Haynes and I'll be talking to my guest today about all of these things. But before we do that, the question is, why am I doing this? And the answer to that is, I believe that standout, that phrase, or even marketing can be seen as a dirty word. But difference does have a place in all sectors, including accounting and bookkeeping. And the sooner the nettle is grasped, the more opportunity, the right opportunity, will come a firm's way. And I really do believe that there is a massive opportunity there to stand out and have a superpower and drive better value for your clients. My mission has always been to support accountants and bookkeepers in doing this and to give them that moment so that they really understand who they are. Okay, so today's episode is slightly different. My guest is Scott Johnson of Kung Fu Accounting, and I'll be talking about standout in terms of his brand. So we won't be talking about perceptions about standout and how it fits in, but we'll be talking about him as a case study and what it really means in real life. So welcome, Scott. I know we've got a lot to talk about in terms of what you believe in, how you run your business, how you pull those together. But so it's great to have you here. Do you want to just give some people, the listeners, some background on you to start?
Yeah, morning. Thank you for inviting me, or allowing me to invite myself along today.
Always.
I am a human being. I live on planet Earth, and I work as an accountant. I run my own firm, and someone challenged me once to always describe it as a boutique Cotswold accounting firm, and I often forget to do that. We have a small team. We are 4 people. And we are hopefully trying to shake up this industry of ours.
Yeah, love it. I think that boutique, whatever, Cotswold, just completely doesn't go with you.
No, it doesn't at all.
And your
That's
brand.
why it doesn't stick in my brain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a total, if we needed, rule number 1 about how not to stand out or how not to sort of behave, it's don't talk about something that you don't believe in, because you won't remember it and you won't live it.
Yeah.
Isn't that right? So, I mean, I guess for me, the question is, how did you get into accounting? And then we'll talk about this flavour of accounting, because, I believe, and I think lots of others believe it to be quite different. I mean, including the fact that you've got Scott the Human written on your name tag. So how did you get into accounting? Tell us a little bit about that first.
So when I was under 10, I don't know how old I was, maybe 7 or 8, and I was standing outside our family home, helping my dad wash his car, which basically meant me watching, not really doing anything. And Uncle Ray turned up. My uncle ran his own company. He was a plumber. And we were talking about school, like, how are you getting on? How's football going? How's blah, 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 blah. How's school? And I said, well, I really like French. I really like maths. I'm not quite so sure about the other things. Geography's interesting, but I find it difficult. And we had this conversation. He said, so language and maths, numbers, are apparently linked in the brain. And he said, if you like maths, you should be an accountant. My accountant's always busy. He's got plenty of work, and he drives a nice car, and he's got a nice home. And that was it. The seed was planted. So I ended up doing work experience. I can't remember how old work experience when that kicks in. I mean, this was like 30 years ago, right? So this conversation planted a seed, and it's now grown into this, whatever this is. But that's how it all began. That's my origin story.
Yeah, okay. And so, I mean, that's about the normal part of it, isn't it, really? I guess it's kind of, okay, so I'm going to be an accountant. I like maths. A lot of the stories that I've heard, certainly when I do the other podcast, the Accountant Success Secrets, is I actually fell in, they fall into accounting. It's just one of those things. But, typical
I feel like I was pushed into it. Uncle Ray planted a seed, and
Yeah.
he kind of encouraged it. And I really enjoyed maths. I then went on to study accounting at university, and I got a degree, a first class degree. I then found an apprenticeship, or whatever they were called back then. I can't remember. It wasn't an apprenticeship, but anyway, I did my 3 years service training with a local firm, and that was it. I just
Yeah.
followed that path, and it was all laid out for me. It was really nice and simple.
Yeah. So how did it? I mean, suddenly it became a lot more complex then. And I mean, I say complex. That's neither positive nor negative, but we've gone from first class degree, well done by the way, that's amazing, through to Scott the Human, with Heath Ledger in the background, and what has been, we had a little chat before we
Mm.
went live about Spiky Scott. So, how did Spiky Scott come along and, this kind of flavour of accounting? Because it is quite a different, it's quite a different sort of package, isn't it?
Mm.
Packaging than a lot of
Yeah.
people. So tell me a bit about that.
So when I had a proper job, I had to fit in. I
Mm,
didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like it was effort. I had to kind of tame myself and restrict myself in order to play the game, in order to stay on the partner track to become successful, in inverted commas. Um, then something happened in my personal life, and this is very often, or it can be a trigger for substantial changes. My wife and I went through some very difficult times trying to have children, and we were going through the IVF process, and she nearly died. And that's very kind of blasé and just tripping off the tongue. It was a while ago now, and we've done a lot of work to get through those difficult times. But that caused me to look at everything differently. Um, Being so powerless in a position where Catherine was on a hospital bed and the surgeon came in and said, if we don't operate now, she will die in 2 days' time, um, was very sobering. And I started questioning literally everything. So, why was I spending an hour to drive 15 miles up the road to get to work? Why was I eating meat? Why was I given milk as a child in nursery? Why are there planes? Why can't we use rainwater to flush our toilets? All of the like everything, every aspect of my life came up for scrutiny, and I then started looking for a reason and purpose. And purpose and accounting, let's say 10 years ago, was very difficult to find. So I made up my own purpose. I couldn't find a job. I didn't know that I wanted to be self-employed. I didn't know that I wanted to run my own company. I didn't know that I wanted to be the first B Corp accountant. But as I researched and found more information about purpose, and I also wanted to be at home with Catherine to support her more than my job would allow. When we have jobs in our industry, particularly, I think there's an expectation that the 9 to 5 isn't 9 to 5. It's earlier, it's later, it's weekends. And I thought, actually, I need Catherine, and I want to be at home with her, and she wanted me to be, or I hope she wanted me to be at home with her as well.
yeah.
But yeah, so I was looking for purpose and meaning and a better balance, a life-work balance rather than a work-life balance.
Yeah.
And Kung Fu Accounting was born in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's lovely. I mean, obviously, nobody wants to go through that sort of personal anguish.
Mm.
And you shouldn't need to in order to find purpose in your life.
Mm.
But I guess when I talk about stand out and what you stand for, I guess that's what I'm talking about, which is taking that moment to understand more about you, where you've
Mm.
come from and what your influences are and what that means for your work. So I think, you've had a specific kind of catalytic moment, haven't you, where, you were going through the kind of the humdrum, if you like, and sort of
Emotions. Yeah.
trying to fit in, and then something happened that actually invited you to do that work, which
Mm.
is, I guess, what the Standout series is all about, but without, the pain that obviously that you've gone through. So from that point, then you set up your business, and as you said, and I knew you early doors, I guess, as Scott the Spiky Scott. you know, sort of certain hair, you know, making a point when you know, went to kind of various conferences and that sort of thing. So tell me about, so that is a particular brand, isn't it? Let's face it, you know, t-shirt, kind of hair. Tell me a little bit about that decision to go that route as well, if it was a decision, or was it just a natural sort of way of breaking the cycle? What do you think?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've been asked it in that way before. I think
Thanks.
it was an expression of something that I was feeling, an exploration as well. So I was, and still am, I love being angry. There's something really cathartic for me, and anger fuels then development and change, in my opinion. Some people see anger as being destructive, but I don't. I really, really love it. I enjoy the rage. I enjoy getting furious. And having a mohawk, being provocative, all of those things were an expression of that. And that served me very well to get through those more challenging times. But what I came to realize, particularly after COVID and lockdowns, and then what happened after that to me personally with my mental health challenges, is that perhaps that wasn't necessarily serving me and my family in the best way.
What about your clients as well? I mean, because one of the things is obviously part of it is who you are and what you're about.
Yeah.
But obviously that the important part is how you serve, you know, your family and friends, whatever, but also how that sort of pitches up in terms of talking to prospects and clients. So how did that work out at the time, do you think?
So it doesn't really matter what people like us think. Accountants have a reputation of being boring. And we can say we're not boring until the cows come home, until the vegan cows come home. But it's still true. People believe accountants to be boring. So when I rock up with my tattoos out and a mohawk, I won clients because I was interesting looking and I had the technical brain behind it to back it up. But it became an act for me. It became a mask that I was putting on, or a wig that I was putting on, a mohawk wig. That it wasn't really a true expression of me. It wasn't the expression of the whole me. So the spikiness is part of me, but I also care deeply. I love very, very hard. I'm very loyal. And going out and starting a riot on the streets with the punks, as much as I would love that, isn't necessarily a true expression of who I am.
Yeah, and that's important, isn't it? Just going back, actually, where did the name Kung Fu Accounting come from? Because that, in many ways, before you kind of answer that question, it feels like a bit of a disconnect, but I'm sure there's a reason behind it. So why did you call it that?
Okay, so one of the first things I did when I moved to Stroud, which is where I am now, was to join a Kung Fu school. And I'm a Kung Fu student. I'm a Kung Fu teacher. It's interesting that the word Kung Fu, very often people think it means martial arts. Technically, the Chinese translation is any skill achieved through hard work and practice. So a bricklayer has Kung Fu, a concert pianist has Kung Fu. For me, the personal story is that the discipline of doing the basics and doing them well and doing them often is what makes me good at martial arts, but it's also what makes me good at accounting and bookkeeping. And the Kung Fu of doing your books, doing your bookkeeping well, regularly, with the right support, with the right instruction, will give you a really, really firm foundation on which to grow a business. And so that's what the Kung Fu, and it's a cool name, right? Again, we can't overanalyze this. It's an interesting name that sticks in people's heads, but it's a very real part of me. That discipline is a core value of mine.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. So, I mean, over the last, I don't know, few months, I kind of see that there has been a slight shift in you and your brand. Because again, it's not just about the person or the team behind it, it's how that shows up, you know. So if I were to look at your LinkedIn, some of your marketing, even, you know, when we talked earlier before this, I can spot a shift in that brand and a shift in that persona. I don't like the word persona because it sounds a little bit like it's made up, and as you were saying, it's all about being authentically you. So the spiky part of Scott wasn't necessarily, it became probably a little bit of a kind of, not a spoof, but it was
Dominant.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about that kind of, that change that you've gone through, because as you said, it's taken a bit of thought and kind of self-discovery, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, here's a marker. It's been 15 minutes and 41 seconds and I haven't sworn yet. So, I mean, I am changing. I'm growing up.
Wow.
Although I did swear beforehand, didn't I? So that's good.
Possibly. I can't remember.
So I think the evolution of me as a human, I'm very lucky. I'm a white British male accountant, chartered accountant with a first class degree. I could walk into any room that I wanted to and be listened to just because I stand up to we and because my skin's the right color. And for the longest time, for quite a long time, I was furious that I lived in that world. And so I was fighting against it. I wasn't embracing it. I wasn't using the privileges that I have by accident of birth. I wasn't using that to the best advantage that I could. And by being spiky, yes, I was an interesting accountant and people wanted to work with me because I had an interesting hairdo, but it wasn't a true expression of me. And I was missing out on opportunities to make real meaningful change because I was refusing to go certain places because I didn't want to be associated with the white British male kind of persona. But that is me. So the introspection that you kind of hinted at is me looking at myself and how I can be more impactful as a human, a person who works as an accountant, but first of all, a human who lives on a planet that is running out of resources, that is getting hotter, that is getting wetter, that is getting more dangerous for more of us. What can I do in order to affect the change that I want? And it's not necessarily about doing tax returns with a cool haircut.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've pulled out two parts there, which, I mean, first of all, the cool haircut bit that you talked about, to stand out often, there is something else. It's not just about the expertise that you bring, and it doesn't matter whether it's accounting or something else. That's almost a given in many ways. If you call yourself an accountant, the person on the street would assume that you're an accountant and you do what accountants do. And actually, the trick is to say, what else is there? What else am I bringing to the party? What else am I as a person that can overlay that sort of accounting part, which is really what you're saying, isn't it? The day job is, I can do a really good job of being your accountant, but you want people to choose you for a reason, don't you?
Yeah. And there is an element of the insecure little boy that needs a pat on the head to be told he's doing a good job. There is something about wanting people to like me, and that's where the maybe kind of countercultural look came from. It was me expressing, like, is this me? I was trying it on for a bit, and I won clients. I had interesting conversations, but it wasn't really me, so it didn't nourish me in the way that I needed. And if you see someone walking down the street with an interesting haircut or with tattoos, the person, the general public will make an assumption about who that person is and what they do. And I didn't necessarily want that to be what people remembered from me. So what I've come to understand is that I want people to feel something when they're with me, and it's not about because I've got an interesting haircut or a different haircut, or that I look a bit different, or that I wear shorts all the time, or that I don't wear shoes. I want people to feel with their heart how much I love what I'm doing, who I work with. And that's very, very difficult to convey in a world where a lot of it is online, a lot of it is visual rather than feeling based, and where in an industry that is very transactional. And let's face it, we are in the business of cranking the handle and feeding the machine.
Yeah, yeah,
So conflict is a very real thing for me, to try and balance all
yeah,
of that to give me what I need as a human,
yeah,
as well as running a business that cranks the handle and feeds the machine.
exactly. And I mean, I think we were talking about sort of growing up,
Yeah.
um, and from my perspective, that's not said as an insult, but it's about doing the work and thinking about what it is that you stand for and the best way of embracing that
Yeah.
and bringing people along on the journey as well, isn't it? Because we can all, in a world that's these days is black and white, good and evil, I don't like what you say, actually, how do you bring people along with you without them kind of railing against you, I guess,
Yeah.
which is, and you said, you've how you've actually got to that place, you said was through being with a lot of women, actually, didn't you? You said
Mm.
that sounds awful. Let's as in hanging out with,
I told you that
having
in private, Philippa.
having friends who are
Yeah.
having peers. Tell us a bit about the sort of growing up bit and the
Mm.
where you've had your influence from and how you've got to where you are.
So yeah, that's I don't really know how it happened. It happened by accident, but I was lucky enough to be in a position where I could take advantage of spending more time with groups of thoughtful, caring women. Um, Online has been amazing in that respect. The thing that I had found is that there's a hardness, there's a toughness to running a business and to being successful and to capitalizing, and that never really sat well with me. And the sorts of and as I was doing some introspection, I was running down our client list, and the sorts of clients that I really enjoyed spending time with were softer, gentler, kinder, caring, more caring. And the ones that I was personally really, really challenged by were the buy low, sell high kind of macho bravado business people that were mostly men. And I just thought, well, actually, this is my business. I'm in charge here. I can choose who I work with. I can choose who I spend time with. And so exploring that, and there is something important about not shying away from that hard male kind of, or masculine rather than male. It's not about men, it's about masculine energy. And some women can be very masculine in their approaches. It's about like yin and yang, balance, hard and soft. And hard is not sustainable forever. And I didn't enjoy spending time around people who were running businesses who personified that. And it was
Yeah,
about how they can do the next deal and how much money they're going to make next year, and potentially making business decisions that I didn't quite agree with, or that I completely refused to accept were acceptable. But spending more time in the company of, I mean, there's a reason why it's called the fairer sex. I think women have a different quality, and it nurtures the little boy in me to be around people who care, and it encourages me to grow. So I'm now spending time with people that I can be the best version of me in their company. And
yeah,
ultimately, this is my business. I should be able to do that. And for the longest
yeah.
time, I didn't make those decisions. I accepted all clients. I accepted all comers.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, what you're basically, this is, I called it a masterclass at the beginning, and I think it really is that what you're really saying is that you've done the work, you've found out what motivates you and how you tick and how you can bring a purpose into what you do as an accountant. But you've also managed to understand how that translates into the prospects and the clients that you want. So you, through doing this work and finding out who you are, you've also realised who your ideal clients are and who you
Mm,
should be with. And that essentially is what standout or brand or whatever you want
mm,
to talk, however you want to say it, That's what it's all about. But you've actually gone on that journey, haven't you, yourself, and done that?
Yeah, and it's still a process. It's still a journey of discovery. And I think one of the things that I found myself saying more and more was that I didn't want a one night stand. I wanted a relationship when I was talking to prospects. And I came to understand that actually it's not about the transaction. And a lot of the male clients that I had, or those masculine clients that I had, were interested in me being an accountant. And they didn't want to be challenged on the fact that they'd just brought just bought 10 new Apple Macs, for example, when they had some 2 years ago that were perfectly fine. They didn't want to be challenged on the bigger things because I was there to be an accountant and I was pigeonholed and I couldn't be myself. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. And the transaction versus the relationship is, and
Yeah.
accountants again are really good at talking about relationships. The proof is in the pudding, I guess. And when the experience comes through and people don't feel like they're loved by their accountant, and maybe everyone should feel like they love their accountant and that their accountant loves them back, then the world, I think, would be a much nicer place.
Yeah. So tell me then, how does that journey that you've been on translate? So let's think about some sort of tangibles. So if we were to look on LinkedIn or other sort of social media, what would we see? For instance, if we were listening in to a client conversation or even an onboarding process, what would we hear? How's that? Is there, have you brought that brand into everything that you do, or started to anyway?
So yes, and is the answer. I'm a control freak, which makes me a great accountant, but it makes me potentially a poor business owner if I want to scale and grow and take over the world. I want things to be done my way, and I maintain all of the relationships with our clients. And sometimes that's a big burden. To a greater or lesser degree of success, I'm trying to be in relationship with people rather than having a transaction. My colleagues have a similar approach, but they're not Scott. They are whoever they are. And there are things that they are good at, and there are things that they are challenged by. And luckily for the rest of the team, the bits that they're challenged by, the bits that I love, which is the softer, like people are drawn to accounting because there's a right and a wrong answer. There's a debit and a credit. You drive on the left, you crash on the right. Everything needs to have a home, and there is a right answer. But in the real world, there isn't a right answer necessarily. And the softer edges, the murkiness, that's where I really start to kind of relish the impact that we can have as an accountant. Yes, here's your tax return, here's your accounts. What does it mean? And what can we do to make one thing, one change this quarter or this month to make that business more impactful in the world? And my ultimate drive is now, and I keep calling myself Scott the Human when I log into video calls, but I'm coming to I'm exploring whether I should be Scott the Earthling, because that then puts me on a par with all animals, all flora, all fauna, as part of an interconnected web. And when we start looking at what we do in that through that lens, I think we'll make very, very different business decisions. And that's the bit that I love about my job, is that I can help people. And we've got the Barclays boycott. So when a client signs up with us, if they work with Barclays, if they bank with Barclays, we'll refuse to work with them unless they agree to switch. And that's an impactful thing that I can do. Again, my business, my rules, right? So I think it's the murkiness. One of my colleagues might say, we just need their bank account. And I'll say, yeah, but who are they with? Who do they bank with? Like, let's find out. Let's make the world a better place. And so it's my job in our little team to ask those sorts of questions. And again, it's about balance. We have the very, very strict accounting and bookkeeping support. My job is then to be the balance to that. I can be less strict, more open, and have conversations that actually mean something.
And that, I think that's really important, because if I was sitting listening to this now as an accountant or bookkeeper, I'd go, oh, that's all very well, but it's got to be a business for the whole team. And if you're going to sort of be the control freak or be the brand, how are you going to grow? And I guess in many ways you've answered the question, haven't you?
Yeah. It's not about growing for me. It's about thriving. It's about having enough. And we've defined, as a team, we've defined what enough is. We know how many clients we can serve. We know how many hours we want to do. We know that we all want to work 3 or 4 days a week at most, not 5 or 6 days a
Oh,
week.
that's lovely. Tell us a bit about that. That's great. I love, how did you get to that process then? Because
So,
that's living the brand, isn't it?
yeah. So in 2022, I had a quite serious mental health, some quite serious mental health challenges. And I had to step away from the business, and I recruited people to cover me. Um, we lost clients because of that, because I wasn't around. And we lost money because we were losing clients and I was paying somebody else to do my job.
Yeah.
We haven't quite recovered from all of that yet. But the thing that really became important to me is that I didn't want someone who refused to work with me on a transactional basis. So if people want a transaction, one of my colleagues can do their tax return for them, and they can just come once a year, off they go, get a tax return done, easy. But if you want a relationship, then I think there's a balance of the people bit, the human bit, the earthling bit, the connection bit, and also the technicalities behind the scenes. And if we know, and it goes back to that kung fu kind of discipline as well, if we know that the bookkeeping is being taken care of, that the payroll is all okay, that the VAT returns are all okay, then all of the bigger conversations that I want to have to be impactful, to change the world, to change the future, are coming from a really strong foundation. And so we divvied up a bunch of jobs, and my job is client relationship management. My colleague does exclusively bookkeeping. Another colleague does just year end. He's the technician. He'll read the little black book of all the tax law for fun.
Yeah.
Why would you do
Somebody,
that? He
somebody
loves it.
has to.
Yeah, exactly. And he absolutely loves it. He is a
Yeah.
very, very technically minded person, but he wouldn't be comfortable talking about the things that we've talked about, for example.
Exactly.
So we are balanced in our team, and it works really, really nicely. I think we've got a great balance.
That's brilliant. I mean, I really could talk for forever about this, because I think it's seeing that awakening and that change and how it's kind of impacted both you and the business is really, really compelling. I guess we've sort of come to an end really, but I'm sure that people will listen to this. I mean, there was a lot of curiosity even sort of leading up to this. So I'm sure there'll be people who have tuned
How
in,
many
and
swear words is Scott going to use?
yeah, some people, we've got
None.
Susanna here and Pavel, who are saying hi. But, if people want to get in touch with you because they love what they hear, what's the best way of doing that?
LinkedIn's my only social media. It's the place that I like to hang out. Maybe it's safe.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm in my what do they call it? In my bubble. But it's my bubble. I can choose to hang out there. So LinkedIn. One of the things we didn't talk about actually was me wanting to change the accounting industry. And
give us a bit of that then. Yeah.
So part of that is about demonstrating that a business, an accounting business, can be a force for good in the world, and then encouraging other accountants to use, or bookkeepers and accountants to use their businesses in a similar way. And over the last couple of years, I've been thinking about something that's called Counting Change, and it's a really cool name. Again, I really like the name. It works on lots of levels, and it's the name that I was going to have for my community interest company when I was going to train train people from underprivileged backgrounds to become accountants and bookkeepers. But that idea never really took off. But the name stuck, and so Counting Change now is a program where accountants and bookkeepers who run their own businesses can go through a process to become more impactful in the way that they run their business, but then also to then push that message out to their clients. And this, for me, is my big lever. If I can change an accounting business, I can change all of their clients without me having to talk to them, if I do a good enough job. But what I came to realize is that I needed more evidence. Again, I think we talked maybe before about knocking against a door that didn't want to open. And I'm trying to sell something that is very provocative and challenging, small p provocative and challenging, to accountants who work in a very traditional industry. So what I'm now focusing on for 2024 is to try and build a business that demonstrates, that sells accounting change as a concept. So there is a course, there are a series of modules, and I'm in the process of recording videos. And now that I've said it on a live, I now need to actually get on and do it. So thank you
Brilliant.
for holding me to account. But there will be a series of videos that people can watch to understand the 10 different steps that I took to make my business what it is. And it's not perfect. We're not making shed loads of money. We're not millionaires. We're not all driving brand new. I can't even think of Teslas. I have
Who
a
wants
bicycle.
to? Yeah.
I've got a bicycle and some boots that I come to work in. But yeah, so if you want to run a more ethical business, then I'm building up a way of accountants and bookkeepers
Fun.
being able to go through that process, and that's my passion. However, that's a hard sell, and unfortunately, until we destroy capitalism, I still need to earn money. So the accounting has to work before
Yeah.
accounting change can then become a thing. So again, there's a
Yeah.
balance there that I'm trying to find at the moment.
That's great. So, I mean, people can find out more, obviously, from the stuff that you do on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
and I've seen that reference to counting change as well. So if they go onto your profile, they'll find everything they need, won't they?
yeah. Stalk away.
To
I am here.
to
I'm open.
start having a think about it, and obviously
Yeah,
reaching out. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, really, it's been great talking to you. I've loved what I've seen of your journey over the last few months. I really have. I've said many times already, I just think that you are the real deal in terms of having a profile, having a brand that you live and breathe and that is meaningful. It's not about not being an accountant. It's not about being not a boring accountant. It's about bringing something else to the party and having purpose beyond what is kind of looking after your family. And, it's kind of finding something that kind of gets you out of bed in the morning. And it's not always easy to find that. I think you've done that self-examination. People come to me because they need somebody to support them to do that. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I did I did do that journey. I have been on that journey for the last 10 years, but there was a massive provocation. And I
Yeah,
wish that we didn't all have to experience that. And people very often say when they have a near-death experience, it changes their outlook. I wish as a society we didn't need that. But maybe we all do.
yeah,
Maybe we need a massive shock in order to make us really think about what's truly important.
yeah, yeah. I'd like to think that working with me is less of a shock, but more of a pleasure. But and we get to where we get to. Actually, we go through that process, and actually, what you've talked about is a deeply personal
Mm,
process. But that's what I do with my
yeah.
clients as well, because not everybody has the time, the energy, or the inclination, or the ability actually
Mm,
to do that amount of self-reflection, because it's a skill in itself,
yeah.
which you've obviously committed to.
Mm,
So that's brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. For those who are interested, next week we're going to be talking to Mayank Pandya, who is the CEO of Pinnacle Global Group. We're going to talk about standout in the offshoring, outsourcing kind of world, which I think is really quite interesting. Scott, you'll probably agree in terms of what's going on with government and budgets, and how businesses are going to survive and kind of sustain their business and people, etc. So that will be an interesting one. But thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And I've got lots of people here. So Pavel, Susanna, Patricia, listening in and really thanking you for your insights, which I think have been fantastic.
I can only apologize to the people that were doing a sweepstake and expecting me to swear a lot. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, take care. We'll end now, but stay on. See ya.